everyone, I'm Scott with Dialed Archery, and in this video we are going to walk through the initial PRÜF setup process. So this is, you got your sight and now it's time to put it on your bow, and we're primarily going to focus on setting your first, second, and third axis adjustments, which is probably one of our most frequently asked questions is when it comes to setting your 3 axis points. And the PRÜF has all 3 axis adjustments. So again, that's first, second, and third. And we'll walk through each axis point as we're adjusting them. So we have our sight, we have the bow. To start off with, there are going to be a few basic tools that you're going to want to utilize. To start with, you need some sort of way to secure the bow as you're working on it. We utilize this ram mount bow vise, and then you need a couple levels. So one question we get a lot of is when leveling the bow in the vise, do we level off of the string or the riser? Everybody has their own way of doing it. We prefer to level off the string. So you'll see here I have an HTM string level attached to the string, and my bow is square in the vise. And the bow has to be squared in the vise because you're setting all of your axis points assuming the bow is square. So the bow is square, it's in the vise. The next level you're going to want to use is some sort of second and third axis level. This is a Hamskea Gen 2 Pro third axis leveling kit. Again, there's other ones out there. We just prefer to use the Hamskea. It works very well. Another tool that you could use, we don't necessarily use them a lot, but they certainly do have their place, is something like this Bright Sight axis adjustment bracket here. This kind of removes the need to have a bow vise, but depending on your frame mount, this sort of system may not work. So in this case, we are mounting a Picatinny sight to a Picatinny rail on this Hoyt. So the Picatinny frame will not fit on this Bright Sight, but if you're using some sort of, dovetail, like our bridge lock or our riser dovetail mount, this sort of system will work. So today in this video, we're going to focus on leveling everything off of the bow when it's installed. So those are the basic tools, and then obviously you're going to need some wrenches. A good Allen wrench set like the Pine Ridge Allen wrench set works really well, and then an L wrench set if you have it. This is a 5/32 wrench, which is what we're going to need for our first axis adjustment. So those are the tools that you need. So now we'll break into our fancy PRÜF packaging, and we'll get the sight out and we'll start getting it installed. So here you see this is our Picatinny mount here. So the first step before I even install the sight is I'm going to loosen the bottom or the oval set screw for the first axis. And the first axis is called out on the frame. You'll see it laser etched on the inside and the outside of the frame. So that is your actual first axis adjustment screws. But there's 2 mounting screws on the actual frame that you need to loosen in order to make those adjustments. And on a right-handed sight, the oblong or the oval set screw hole is going to be on the bottom. If you're a left-handed shooter, that oval set screw hole is going to be on the top. So this is a right-handed sight, so our oblong or oval hole is on the bottom, and I'm just going to take my 5/32 L wrench and I'm just going to crack that loose, and now that'll allow me to adjust the 2 set screws on either side of the frame, and that's what's going to shift your first axis back and forth. So I got that loosened, and then now I'll loosen the Picatinny clamp screw, and this is what's going to actually allow us to mount the sight to the Picatinny rail on the bow. And in this particular case, you'll see on this Picatinny rail there's actually 3 slots that this sight could fit within. Generally, good rule of thumb is just start with it in the center, and then for some reason, if you need to shift it up and down after the fact, you can do that. But setting it at the center position will generally cover 99% of the shooters out there. So we'll get this installed. And then this is where, everybody tends to over tighten. You really just need to snug that down to where it's secure. You do not need to over tighten it. So now the sight's installed. I'm going to rotate my dial. So now this is the starting position. So the scope housing is in the highest position. And then we'll take our Hamskea level and we are going to mount it at the top of the angled elevation rail. So now I have two levels that I'm looking at, and I'm looking at the horizontal levels. So with the string level, I know the bow is level up and down, and now both levels are level left and right. So in this case, the Hamskea level, which is on the rail, it is slightly off from the string level. So that means that the rail on the sight is slightly canted, which that's your first axis. So what that's going to ensure is as we're adjusting our dial to further distances and that rail is traveling down, it's in a linear or a straight line. It's not at an angle, which could throw your shot left and right down range. So it's not terribly off, and to be honest, if this was my personal bow, I would probably call that good, but for the sake of this video, I am going to adjust it ever so slightly. So again, the first axis adjustment screws are both the inside and the outside of the frame, and they push against each other. So as you move one way, it tightens against this screw. As you move this screw this way, so they'll shift back and forth. So I am going to loosen the one screw, and then I will tighten this screw. And you'll see as you make adjustments, the level will move. So it's just making adjustments to each screw to get that level square. So right there. So now the level on my elevation rail matches the level on my string. So the rail is leveled to the bow, which is what we're trying to accomplish. So now you can just tighten both of these screws so they're pressed against each other. So that will secure the first axis. So now that's set. The next step is I'm gonna have to take the sight off so I can tighten that oblong set screw that we originally loosened. But because my first axis screws are tight against each other, I don't have to worry about the first axis coming out of whack. That's one thing that I think a lot of people get kind of scared about, is like, I just made this initial setting. Now I have to take my sight off. Is that going to throw the first axis out of whack? And it will not. As long as those two set screws are tight against each other, everything will hold. So I'll go ahead and remove the sight, and then I will tighten that bottom oblong screw. Okay. And then I'll go ahead and reinstall the sight. Again, make sure that you put it in the same position as when you started. So in this case, in the middle, tighten that back down, and the levels say everything held, so everything's good. So now that we have our first axis set, we'll go ahead and we'll move on to the third axis. The third axis is going to adjust the scope housing. So essentially, when we're at full draw, whether we're uphill, downhill, we're always looking at the pin square. We're not staring at the side of the pin. And a lot of people will prefer to set their third axis when they're at full draw. I don't particularly put a lot of emphasis on third axis. With us being, based in Minnesota, we're not taking a lot of super steep, downward angle shots and stuff, but it is an important feature to pay attention to. I just want to get it close to where I'm looking at the pin square. For this video, we'll just do the adjustment in the actual vise itself rather than at full draw. So for the third axis adjustment, you're going to pay attention to the actual level within the scope housing. So right now, my string level, my Hamskea level match, but my scope housing level is bubble right. So that tells me that my second axis is off, which we will get to adjusting that, but then, the third axis may be off as well. So your third axis adjustment is located on the front of the sight, and it is labeled third. So it's going to be this, I believe that is a 9/64 set screw, and it's located right next to the micro windage knob. So I am going to loosen that. And you just loosen it. Okay. And then we'll get our bow level again here. So, and with this particular vise, it does have slots in it, so I can angle the bow within the vise. If you're using a vise that doesn't allow you to do it, then you're gonna have to do at full draw. But again, for this video, we'll do it right in the vise. So I'll go ahead and tip the bow at a 45. So now I am just, with my hand, I am just going to adjust the scope housing. And again, it's going to rotate on the knuckle where the mag attaches to the windage. So I'm not really going to go off of my string level here because the string level is rotating with the string. So I'm going off of the hamski level that's on the rail, because this level was square to this level in the beginning, right? So now I'm going to match the level on my housing to the hamski level, which they do match now. So my third axis is square with my other two levels from the beginning. So I'll go ahead and tighten down the third axis. And again, you don't need to, really grip on these screws. Once they're snug, they're set. So I'm just gonna spot check it one more time. Yep, and it's good. And again, this is how I do my axis. I mean, if you Google first, second, and third axis setups, on sites and YouTube videos, there's plenty of other ways to do it. This is just a very simple way to do it, at home or if you're in the field. And then, as I'm shooting, if I notice that something may be off, then I'll go back and do a much more kind of detailed, thorough analysis of what the axes are set at. But this generally, this will work for just about every bow and majority of the shooters. So we'll move on to the second axis, which again, we are going to square all the levels to ensure that everything matches. So now second axis is located on the front of the sight on the elevation block that sits within the angled elevation rail. And again, it's labeled second on the inside and the outside. And it's going to be your bottom oblong screw on the elevation block. Your second axis adjustment is independent from your elevation adjustment. When you go to actually start the sight-in process and you have to move your scope housing up and down within the elevation rail, you won't throw your second axis off. So they are independent. And in this case, my string level is level, my elevation rail level is level, but my scope housing level is just slightly right bubble. But again, for me, I would call this good, but we're going to be a little bit more critical and set it perfectly. Again, that bottom oblong screw is going to be a 5/30 or a 9/64, excuse me. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen that, and then there's two adjustment screws on each side of this block. So you're just going to crack this loose. And then those side screws are going to be, a 5/64 set screw. So loosen one, and then I'll tighten the other one. So I'll just tighten this front screw. And then I'll come around that other side and I will tighten this other set screw here. And again, the outside and the inner set screws tighten against each other, so you don't have to worry about them coming loose. So now that everything's tight, you can level the string level out again. Check my elevation level, check my mag housing level, everything matches up. Now our first, second, and third axis are set for this bow. The next step is to get out on the range and get our 20-yard mark sighted in, and that's when we'll also just kind of do the final check, to make sure that, again, for our third axis, we're staring at the pin square, and our shots aren't drifting left or right or anything like that. So now that all of our axes are set, the next step is to hit the range and start sighting in our 20-yard mark, which is step 1 for the sight-in process. That will be a separate video, but one thing you can do to kind of prepare for the sight-in process is you'll notice when you pull the PRÜF out of the packaging, this elevation block or the scope housing is set to the middle of the rail. That's primarily because that's how it's going to fit the best in the package. Majority of shooters are going to end up having to lower this block to the bottom of the rail to get their 20-yard dead stop. So if I were to go out and shoot right now, I'm going to impact excessively low. So you can save some time by go ahead and dropping this elevation bracket down, which is just loosening the top and the bottom screw on the elevation block. And again, even though we loosened this bottom oval screw to adjust our second axis, because your second axis adjustment screws on the side of the block are tight, when you loosen this bottom screw, your second axis will not come out of align. So you don't have to worry about that. So you can go ahead and loosen these 2 screws, drop the bracket down, and then start shooting your 20-yard mark from there. If you impact high, you bump the block up. If you impact low, then you're gonna have to go to the dial. But again, we'll have all those sight-in instructions in a separate video. If you have any further questions, you can always reach out to us at our support email, which is just support@dialedarchery.com. For other tech tips, you can check out the Dialed U page at dialedarchery.com.